Hey there, it's Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR. Before we get into the next episode, I wanted to ask that you subscribe to the show. It'll help us get even more unique and interesting guests on the podcast and in turn continue to educate management teams and the growing ecosystem that creates value for fast-growing private and public companies. And while you're at it, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. Very much appreciated.
If it's a $120 billion business and you have a 10% return rate, you can have $12 billion tied up in returns.
Dealing with return merchandise costs the retail industry hundreds of billions of dollars each year. For a long time, companies were content to bake the cost of returns into the price of their product, but now the rise of e-commerce and the prevalence of fraud have forced them to be more proactive.
We've seen cases where we've helped retailers free up $150 million worth of working capital very quickly.
Being a public company can be hard. Small missteps can have outsized consequences. I'm Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR, and over the last 25 years, we've helped thousands of companies understand and navigate the stock market and the media. We'll demystify these and other increasingly complex stakeholder groups so you can focus on what you do best, building your company and unlocking your true potential. This is Welcome to the Arena from ICR. Everybody experiences buyer's remorse. Maybe it's a pair of pants you bought online, some electronics, or even a love seat. And when we get that feeling about an item, what do? We return it, either in store or through the mail. But what happens to those products after we send them back? Surely they're repackaged and restocked, right? Well, in a lot of cases, vendors aren't equipped to process those returns, and they end up being sold in bulk at a loss, or worse, dumped in a landfill. Well, the good news is that sender Shamiss has made it his mission to prevent that from happening. He's the co-founder and CEO of ReturnPro, a global reverse logistics platform that works with the world's largest retailers and vendors to solve the significant and growing problem of merchandise returns. Sender has spent over 20 years analyzing the business of returns and overall retail trends. He's a proven entrepreneur who's passionate about tech and spent his career building multiple e-commerce supply chain and SaaS companies. Let's enter the arena with Sender Shamiss. What's like the magnitude of this problem? What's the overall return percentage, like brick and mortar, e-commerce, stuff like that?
Retail sales in 2024, they were approximately $5.23 trillion. About 16 to 17% of everything sold is returned. And the number is about $890 billion, which is massive. And it continues to grow.
We'll talk about how you solve the problem in a minute, but I think it would be really helpful to paint a picture of a typical return, how it affects the retailer, how it affects the vendor, and how it affects the customer.
So I think the best way to describe it is just to kind of explain there's two different types of returns. There are returns where someone purchases something online, and there's physical brick and mortar returns. Lately, they've been crossing. There's situations where, somebody shops at a specific store like a Walmart, and they'll walk in and buy something off Walmart, and then maybe they'll get home, realize they forgot something, and buy it on the internet as well. Maybe they'll want to return both things. So really, returns as a service has to be as nimble as retail. So you need things like omni-channel, things of that nature. But I mean, the typical customer walks into the store and purchases an item, has some buyer remorse. In most cases, about 70% of everything returned is buyer remorse. And then they make an attempt to go back to that store and return that item. There's usually some amount of time where the retailer allots a return. The customer experience in the store has been the same for the last 50 years. It hasn't changed much.
100%.
They just walk into the customer service counter, wait in line, and kind of bring it to that counter, and you say, here it is. Somebody asks for a bunch of information, asks you to sign some piece of paper, which means nothing.
Yep.
Puts it into a computer and into some shopping cart or on a pallet, and off it goes. At that point, most people think, oh, my item's going to be restocked. Well, in most cases, less than 5% of items get restocked. What really gets restocked a lot are clothes.
Yeah.
So apparel and things of that nature. But electronics don't. There's customer privacy data, things like paint, furniture. You're not going to ask a minimum wage clerk at the back of a store to start going through every single screw and bolt that's supposed to be in an item. Goods like lamps and tools and things of that nature. These items have to go through some sort of inspection. These stores aren't set up to inspect these items. So it starts this reverse logistics journey or the returns management journey. From a vendor perspective, usually there's some sort of relationship between the vendor and the retailer, especially if it's mass retailers. That relationship exists on e-commerce the same way. But before I get into that vendor piece, I think it's important that I explain the differences between retail returns and e-commerce returns.
Yep.
E-commerce returns are a little bit trickier because they've lost some amount of money or invested some amount of money to get that product to you. It's also very possible that shipping was bundled with other items to make it cheaper. When you're sending that product back, now they have to incur that massive shipping amount, whether it's apparel or anything else. Whether they restock it makes no difference. That shipping amount is lost. So for them, the single most important thing is to get that product back to themselves as cost effectively as possible. Usually that entails either dropping it off at some sort of location. If they can entice you to walk into some sort of store, in an Amazon case like a Whole Foods or something along those lines, Walmart will incent you to walk back into the store and drop it off there. There's companies out there, apparel companies, really big ones like H&M, that have started charging fees for shipping it back. They'll charge like $2.75 an item and force you, or at least entice you by not charging you, to say, go to one of our stores that's within a mile or two of your location.
Yep.
Not only does that bring that foot traffic where they hope to get another sale and kind of recover the sale they lost in the first place with the return, but it also stops that insane shipping amount. There's also a new concept now where they're going to entice the customer to say, okay, keep the item, tell us the condition, tell us if you opened the box, and if you didn't, keep it. Maybe we'll give you a discount or a coupon or some $5 gift certificate. And within 2-3 days, we're going to try to sell it, even at a discount, to get it to the next customer. So we don't have to ship it and ship it again. That shipping amount is saved right then and there. We don't have to warehouse it. We don't have to pay 3PL charges. So we're trying to find that next best home for it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool, but it's very hard to do.
One stat in reading about your company that kind of blew me away, 8 out of 10 people roughly say that the return policy factors into whether they're going to be a customer or not, right? So why do you think retailers have put this way down on the priority list for such a long time?
I think it starts from big box retail, the Targets, the Best Buys, the Costcos, the BJs. They're trying to get customers to walk through the door as often as possible. So their whole model is return anything, anytime.
Yeah.
We are going to treat you as best as possible. And they've done that for years. They're realizing, A, there's a lot of fraud within returns, especially when you add this omni-channel of e-commerce. B, there's a ton of customer experience that comes along with it. And C, if you're restocking less than 5% of the items, what happens to 95% of the retail of the value of that item? So they're really starting to look in different places to try to recover more value from their returns. It's not that they haven't paid attention to it. It's that it's been built into the cost of the good all these years. And now that e-commerce sales have gone up so tremendously, you see the return rate going higher and higher. But the return rates in stores are rising as well. And they're rising because the products themselves are just not as durable as they used to be. We're manufacturing products for single generations, right? They're hoping that you're going to upgrade or change your model every single year. And that's also not a very sustainable model, in my opinion. So I think as a society, there's two ways of reducing it. Deal with returns, yes, what we're doing as a company, but also as a consumer base, we got to stop shopping so much.
Yeah. That's a great segue into what ReturnPro does. I know you're separated from kind of other businesses that are doing this. Maybe tell us what ReturnPro does every day.
We lay out our business in 3 tranches. We service the retailer, we service the brand, which is the vendor itself, and we service these 3P marketplaces, right? Our clients are the retailers. Our clients are these brands.
Yep.
So we find that the best way to service them is to help them achieve the highest possible recoveries on the individual items. So make sure we mitigate that loss from the return itself as much as possible. And then we give them the best front-end experience returning an item. What can we do on the .com, on the returns portal, when somebody's returning an item? And the way we divide it, the way we solve the problem, and really that's the mission statement of the company, is solving returns. We find that most of the businesses out there that manage returns either touch SaaS itself, supply chain itself, or e-commerce itself. What we do is we actually try to solve the individual problem. So we're not out there pitching a SaaS solution and trying to charge service fees. We're not there to say we're some sort of 3PL for returns management, send us product and maybe we'll refurbish it or move it around or sort it or do whatever. We're going to analyze your business. We're going to figure out what the best solution for your returns problems are. And we're going to provide you with the right software at the right time. We're going to provide you with the right supply chain solution at the right time and the right re-commerce solution. Preferably it'll be your own marketplace. But ultimately, it's software, supply chain, re-commerce that really solves the problem. Instead of trying to charge you service fees and profit from individual items, we're in it to figure out how much money can we make you, or more accurately, how much of the loss that's currently associated to your returns can we mitigate. And that's really the mission statement of the company. And that's what differentiates us from everybody else.
You're working for some of the biggest and best in the world. Talk about your customer base, some of the brands that you work with, which I know Walmart is among them, but you can help almost any company of any size, right, Sender?
Yeah. So we have customers from Walmart's to Bass Pro's. Walmart's a company with 4,000 retail stores in the United States. Bass Pro's a company with 250 or something along those lines. Dealing with them is different. A company like Walmart can have 10,000 vendors with maybe 50,000 contracts. And maybe Bass Pro has 2,000 vendors with maybe 10,000 contracts. And some contracts say that the retailer can return the product to a vendor for 100% credit. Some say it cannot be returned at all. Some say destroy my item, recycle my item, whatever. And there's many different disposition paths for these items based on these contractual agreements. And they're made between some sort of salesperson and some sort of merchant within these two organizations that negotiate on behalf of these two companies to make the best possible deal for themselves. What they never consider is returns. And if they do, it's usually, a few pages at the end of the contract. What we do is we take that contract, we kind of scrub it, and we say, this is how you're doing it today. Let us analyze it physically. Let us touch the inventory physically. And let us recommend for you what the best possible process is. We don't want you moving this product across the country 5 or 6 times. We don't need you to send it to another refurbisher. We can refurbish it in-house. All we have to do is make some small policy changes and everybody profits. And the best place for your product in the first place was the channel it's sold on. There's a reason why it's sold in the first place. So let's put it back into that marketplace. And if that retailer cannot handle that product or the brand cannot handle it on their marketplace, we'll put it on our own proprietary or third-party marketplaces, but it's a temporary move. Our goal is to figure out how to put it right back on their marketplace. Even if they don't have like a secondary market set up for maybe previously opened items or refurbished items, it may take years, but over time we'll set it up, or maybe it's a website or a section in their store.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we want to see that product inside their marketplaces, and we want them to ingest it so they can benefit from it and their customer base can benefit from
it. So we understand that returns represent a multi-billion-dollar issue for the retail industry, and that the rise of e-commerce has really forced them to get proactive about it. And while it's all well and good for a company like ReturnPro to come in and say, we'll help you out with this issue, how much value can they actually hope to add here in terms of freed up working capital?
The average recovery from these items is approximately 10 to 15%. And there's so many liquidators out there and just people who sell this on auction, by pallet, mass amounts of returns, because this is some warehouse, usually some 3PL partner, and once a year, somebody in the financial side, maybe a CFO or somebody says, what is this doing in our warehouse? Let's deal with it. They put it up for auction and sells 10 to 15 cents on the dollar. That's a massive loss. On top of that, there's a huge amount of money that sits in working capital between these retailers and vendors. And that's where that contract management system is so important. You can have a contract between a vendor and a retailer that says, you purchased 100,000 widgets from me, $1 a piece. I have an allowance where I can return 5% of the widgets without any questions asked. Every time I tell you what widgets I returned, we reconcile once a month, and that money is decremented from your next purchase order. There's no kind of standardized way of how this is done. And because of that, it's a very confusing process and is not done very well. What we do is we make recommendations that are fair to both the retailers and the vendors, and we show them how much money is tied up in working capital. If it's a $120 billion business and you have a 10% return rate, you can have $12 billion tied up in returns. We've seen cases where we've helped retailers free up $100, $150 million worth of working capital very quickly. And the same thing with vendors. I think I use retailers a lot because our core business is dealing with enterprises, but we also help a lot of small brands. So as we roll out our solutions to the big box retailers, what we find is that these vendors come up to us and say, what do I do with my returns? Can you help me? So we built these smaller software solutions where they have a portal where they can log in, that same shared workspace, but they could add their maybe Amazon account or Walmart.com account or maybe eBay account or Mercalibro or Shein or whatever, and they could see all their marketplace returns in one place.
Yeah.
They can direct that inventory into one of our warehouses. And if they have a direct-to-consumer website, whether it's Shopify or Salesforce or whatever, they can add it to that same platform. And now they see these returns that come from big box retail, where they sell as vendors. They see these direct-to-consumer returns that come from their sites directly, and they see these third-party returns that come from third-party marketplaces. So it's just a massive solution for vendors that helps. And for us, it makes no difference.
Yeah.
It shows up with the right barcoding because of our SaaS in our warehouses. We scan it, and our job is bring it back to life.
You clearly have a commitment to innovation, and the bigger and more successful you get, the more you can invest in the future. So what are the kinds of innovations that you see coming down the road? How are you using AI? How do your brands that you work with benefit from your technology investments?
So we're working on some pretty cool tech I'd rather not discuss for pre-purchase.
That's okay.
That's really cool right now. We'll be announcing some of that soon. So the post-purchase experience is the most important. What happens on the website? What kind of tech can we add? How can we avoid a return? What kind of exchanges can we give the customer? What kind of incentive can we give them to keep the item? In what cases do we not want them sending it back at all? Where the shipping cost outweighs the recovery of the item, which is called the keep it algorithm, which is pretty cool on its own. And then what we do is we have AI in 3 places: at the point of return, at the point of first touch, and at the point of re-commerce. And really, machine learning has become a huge part of our business. What they do at the point of return is figure out, first, do we want the item? Secondly, when we receive it, what path should it go down? And then thirdly, has that customer done anything wrong from a fraud perspective?
Right.
And that usually takes physically touching the item. There are some ways of knowing even before, and that's based on something called a trusted customer algorithm. But in most cases, that's why it's so important for us to kind of be there throughout the entire life cycle of the return, because we get to touch the item and we get to document the serial number. We get to understand where it came from. People return a lot of fake AirPods, for example. They'll buy these items and then put the fake one in the box and return them. And some of these fakes are so amazing, the retailer doesn't even know they're receiving a fake.
Brutal.
So when we physically receive them in our warehouse, we have a way of communicating that where they don't have in standard logistics, like UPS, FedEx, and these companies don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
That's a big part of our service offering, and AI plays a massive role in that. But there's so much more than that. Testing, refurbishing, rekitting, packaging. How much is that item going to sell because it's not brand new anymore? What's going to be the yield on the item? If you're taking back power tools, maybe you get a 90% yield. If it's furniture, maybe you're getting a 70, 75% yield. You have to figure that out. It has to be preloaded into these algos that are then touched by this amazing LLM and needs to make a decision and then kind of re-educate itself every single time. Then we have to resell it, and we have to know what that resale value is going to be, including marketplace fees, any additional shipping fees, any marketing fees, fulfillment fees, and all that. And at the end, we pop out this number that says that's going to be the recovery, and it's better than the 10, 15% that you would get for liquidating or selling it as is or whatever. And the machine makes a decision and says, hot dog, no hot dog.
Yeah. One of the things that never even occurred to me is returns ending up in a landfill. Just talk about how that happens.
So that's a great question. And I think the easiest way to answer it is kind of talk to you a little bit. I remember you asked me at the beginning of the conversation when we started, you said, what's the supply chain cost of handling returns? We're capable of using our numbers and our partners' numbers and kind of reverse engineering the costs. And we estimate it to be at approximately $200 billion. Now, if you take that same 10 to 15% recovery on average across the board, and you apply it to a $900 billion number, guess what? It's less than the $200 billion.
Yeah.
So why touch anything, right? Theoretically, throw it all out. You lose less money. Well, that's not responsible, right? That's not the right thing to do. That's number one. So first and foremost, it's just not the right thing to do for the environment. Number two, and I think more importantly, I think that what you end up having is a lot of these retailers that have no choice but to touch the product, because within these items, there's 100% cost recovered return to vendor items. Meaning that if they touch those items, the agreement says that if I return it to you, Mr. Vendor, I'm going to get 100% of the cost back on it. So it's very advantageous for them to send it to a company like ours, where we sort it out and say, oh, Stanley, here you go. Here's your 5,000 mugs out of your 100,000 that you sold. Now you owe retailer X, whatever the cost credit was against that original purchase invoice, you owe them that recovery. And if it was $20 a piece, now you owe them some $100,000 for those items. And what ends up happening is, because we're sifting through these returns that come to us straight from the retailer, and we're separating the items that are eligible for credit and items that are not eligible for credit, which are called liquidation items, we're already putting that supply chain cost into the item. And so do a lot of third-party logistics companies. So at that moment, if we just add our algorithm and know that it's going to cost us a few pennies more, or maybe $1 or $2 or $3 to refurbish that item and bring it back to life, we're going to inject ourselves and say, look, your traditional logistics company is not going to touch this item. They're just going to sort it out and send it out. We're going to add value. And our adding value is going to cost you much less than bundling it and sending it specifically to another third party who refurbishes these items, because we're already touching it. It's literally open on somebody's box. That's where the competitive edge of doing this entire process of doing SaaS supply chain re-commerce comes in. It's our secret sauce, right?
Yep.
And that's what makes it possible. We love what we do. We really enjoy taking pride in saying these items didn't make it to a landfill. Like, we've never thrown items away. We try to sell everything because there's a market for everything.
Yep.
Whether it's to recycle commodities themselves or physically bring it back to life. We can bring back almost 99% of everything we touch back to life.
I guess my last question, Sender, is we're sitting here, in 2025. There's the threat of tariffs and some uncertainty in the political landscape. What's your take on the tariffs and how that could affect things?
At the end of the day, if you take those items and send them, wherever you send them, most likely they're going to end up across the border, maybe Mexico or something along those lines, because that's a cheaper place in terms of labor to bring those items back to life. Or maybe they'll find a secondary market there that wasn't available in the US. A lot of these brands think their products get recycled, which is a big part of the problem in our industry, where they say destroy, recycle. Actually never ends up happening. So from our perspective, the most important thing we can do to protect these brands is bring the items back to life. And we try as much as we can to do it in the continental United States. We have, a bunch of dedicated buildings in the US, a couple in Canada, a couple in Mexico. We even have some in Southeast Asia. But we do the economies of scale. We figure out financially where it makes the most sense. And we send it to where it makes the most sense. We're not really affected by tariffs, but our clients are. Some of the prices of the items are going to go up because of the tariffs themselves. But, Americans are consumers. And like I said at the onset, the only way to stop $890 billion of returns is just to buy less product. And we as a society will not be doing that anytime soon.
Merchandise returns create margin compression and working capital issues for retailers and inefficiencies for all the parties involved. Sender and his team at ReturnPro are working to solve that $900 billion problem. Traditionally, a lot of retailers have treated the return problem as an afterthought, but optimizing the return process could unlock billions of dollars in working capital, help companies with their net margin, and help prevent billions of dollars worth of product from ending up in landfills. In that sense, everybody's a winner. At Welcome to the Arena from ICR, we're working really hard to bring you exciting guests and great content. If you found this episode insightful, please subscribe to the show on your podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating. The more the show grows, the more interesting voices we can have on the podcast, and in turn, that should demystify a lot of the stakeholders around public companies and soon-to-be public companies. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Sender Shamiss. His company, ReturnPro, is the only company attacking the problem of returns with a fully integrated platform and executing at a high level. I'll be fascinated to watch them continue to leverage cutting edge technology to create value and reduce waste, and would love to have them back on in the future. This is Tom Ryan. We'll see you next time back in the arena.
References to specific stocks are not intended to be recommendations for specific trading behavior. Comments presented on this podcast are intended for informational and educational purposes only, and do not represent opinions or recommendations on whether to buy, sell, or hold shares of a particular stock. All investors are advised to conduct their own independent research into individual stocks before making a trading decision. In addition, investors are advised that past stock performance is no guarantee of future price performance.